Alright, so it's a chilly morning out here at Lebanon. I am getting ready to pre-flight the 140 and take it home. The last 4 months I have been able to get really comfortable with this airplane, and honestly I've been really impressed by its performance. Even at max gross I was able to get it off the ground in 600 to 800 feet and consistently had some really good short field landings, so I feel comfortable taking it home now. We're about to head back to the house, have our very first landing on the grass in my strip. And my strip is a little bit different than maybe your normal grass strip. So I'm looking forward to going back into it today with the 140. Obviously, it'll be right there at the house. I've had a lot going on these last few months, and I'm really glad that now that it's cooler, I've got better performance with the aircraft. I've got a higher margin for error going back in. The runway's back up and fixed, so I will head that way. See you in the air.
All right, plan for the day. We're gonna take off a normal takeoff out of here, and at that point we will make a left crosswind, make sure everything looks good on the engine, head out towards the house, and do a circle over the house, making the first landing on the grass strip in a very long time. I'm excited. Looks like we got a little bit of fog this morning out to the east. We'll fly over and make sure that's not going to affect us with the strip. Go from there. Alright. Winds at Lebanon are still reported calm. The typical elevation around here is about 550 feet, at least at the threshold of my strip, which funny enough looks like it's right at the edge of a fog embankment over the river. So you can kind of see out here, this is the Cumberland River that snakes back and forth, ends up dipping down and around this way. As an approach brief, we are going to be landing northbound today. We are committed once we cross the creek at or below 700 feet. If I'm not below 700 feet or if I'm above 70 knots, we will go mist at the creek, climb back out, set up for another low approach or landing. I've got plenty of fuel and plenty of options. If I don't like what I see, I'll go back to Lebanon. Below 70 and 700, we're committed.
So I used to think that only bad pilots had accidents. And then I crashed a plane. The story that I want to tell you guys today is a personal one. As a professor, I teach aviation safety, and I incorporate this into, well, not just that class, but almost every class that I teach down at MTSU. And it's not an easy thing for me to walk through and talk about, but I felt like I wanted to tell this story since I started the Cessna 140 project. So if you look up what is failure, one of the simplest and I guess most poignant definitions is a lack of success. And so that's really what I'd like to talk about here, is my lack of success. To do so, I would like to go back a few years. In 2009, I went to the Lebanon Municipal Airport, and it was my first time getting to fly in a small general aviation aircraft. I ended up not finishing my flight training in that Cessna 172, but found a mall on eBay, of all places. We flew up to Minnesota, where I picked up the plane. I think I spent 20 hours in the pattern learning to land the mall because of how challenging of a tail wheel it is. And then, as crazy as it may seem, my CFI at the time, was still a good friend, signed me off for my solo flights in that mall and completed all my flight training, took my private pilot check ride in the mall. The reason I got the mall was I had a desire to go to Papua New Guinea as a missionary pilot. And one of the things I knew I would have to get competent at was high performance takeoff and landings. We were fortunate enough to have a decent sized little farm in Middle Tennessee. After I got my private pilot's license, we started to build a runway. It's a 3-tiered runway that is just a grass strip. It's about 1,150 feet long, and that runway trained me on high precision takeoffs and landings. Every takeoff and every landing was what I like to call 110% performance. You just had to have more precision than a 5,000 foot by 100 foot asphalt runway. So I ended up getting my private and instrument in the mall. Ultimately got my CFI. In January of 2017, I contacted a flight school in Lebanon, Tennessee, Class Bravo Air. I was getting ready to get married. I was trying to find a place to live, and I needed a steady job, and Class Bravo Air was going to be that. It was January 11th, 2017, and that day changed my life forever. Checked the weather that morning. It looked like the winds were going to be out of the south, but that was okay because in my grass strip, which is a one-way in and one-way out strip, in the mall, which drops like a rock and comes in at a very, very slow speed, my sloped runway was very manageable with that 10 to 12 knot tailwind. That's what the forecast was. The flight over was uneventful. I'd been offered a job on the spot right at the interview. They were ready for me that week to come in and start working. And so I was texting my then fiance, letting her know the good news that, hey, I've gotten hired, walking out to the plane. I didn't leave the building until about 2 o'clock when I walked out to start my pre-flight. I vividly remember thinking the winds are stronger than they had been earlier. And the first thing I did before I even taxied out of my parking spot was check the AWOS. And the winds were out of the south, but they were at 12 knots. So I taxied down, took off. The mall's a great performer, so I think it was off even before the end of the displaced threshold. One of the things that's different about a lot of grass strips, but especially mine and the ones in New Guinea, you had airborne committal points. So the old saying is you can always go around. Well, that's not always the case. And for me, it wasn't. I had a airborne committal point that if I were over a certain landmark, which for me, it was the creek just shy of my runway, if I was not below a certain airspeed and a certain altitude, I had to go around. Once I passed that point, I was committed. I had to land the aircraft regardless of the condition. That was a procedure that I had set out here after looking at this strip, contemplating it, talking to other pilots and asking them what their thoughts were on it. It's something that I developed as almost a standard operational procedure or a safety practice. The reason I have that airborne committal point is I don't think that the aircraft could outclimb the terrain. On that day, when I was coming into land, I set up across the creek and I was at my correct airspeed, that as I was on short final, a huge gust of wind hit me from the left, causing the wingtip to dip. And I did something that I had never done before. I tried to go around. So I'm past my committal point, and that put me in a very hazardous situation. The wind sheared from right off my tail to a direct crosswind at its maximum intensity, and it was so strong that the plane literally pivoted in the air into the wind. And that pivoting motion caused the left wing to stall, so it really started to enter a spin. It is very fortunate that I was only about 15 feet above the ground at the time. I was sort of hugging the ground as I moved around the field, trying to get into the wind to climb back out and go to Lebanon. The left wingtip drug the ground, pulling the nose down into it, resulting in a very aggressive impact. I was at full throttle. I was life flighted to Vanderbilt, and I remember riding the helicopter, wondering, what did I do wrong? What did I mess up? Why did I just crash my plane? The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, is tasked with finding the probable cause of every civil aviation accident in the United States. That includes general aviation accidents. It is their responsibility to know why every crash occurred. In their aviation investigation final report, they state that the probable cause was the pilot's inadequate compensation for gusting tailwind conditions, which resulted in the loss of airplane control during the landing flare. But there were factors at play that this NTSB report doesn't go into. One of the things that you probably know if you study aviation safety is that every accident has multiple items that led to the accident. A chain of events, so to speak. There's not just one cause here. Many of you might be familiar with the Swiss cheese model, which Dr. James Reason came up with to describe the 4 types of issues that can lead to an accident, whether it's passive causes or active causes. You can see, using a Swiss cheese model, some of the barriers that I had set up and how they were faulty. My organizational factors, if you want to think of it like that, the things outside of my operations. There's several factors that go into that accident occurring. And it's not just, as the NTSB says, my inadequate controlling. The accident sequence started way earlier. So in the weeks prior to the accident, there had been a NOTAM on the weather station at London Airport, which was a AWOS, had not been reporting inaccurate information. It was just a computer glitch to where the receiving station that took the weather information and then sent it to the computer for transmission, they would not communicate with each other. And so you'd get reports that were several hours old sometimes, and sometimes you wouldn't get any reports at all. That NOTAM had come down only a few days prior to my accident. So when I went to the airport, there was no NOTAM on the AWOS system. I assumed it to be accurate, but that proved a very costly mistake. When I went out to the aircraft after I completed my interview, the first thing I did was check the winds. I wanted to make sure they were still within my current personal minimums. And according to the AWOS, they were 180 at 12 knots out of the south. That was the edge of my personal minimums, but it was still my personal minimums. I felt comfortable doing that. I didn't question it. I departed and I headed back towards my strip. Later, I figured out that that wind data was from 8 or 9 hours earlier that morning, around 7 a.m., when the weather was 12 knots out of the south, but I was observing much stronger winds, and my gut told me that. I just didn't listen to it. So why talk about this? Why put a video out about this accident? Partially because it took me a long time to overcome my failures. In aviation, we're such a high stakes industry that any failure feels final. Whether it's a written exam that we failed to pass, or an oral part of a check ride, or even a check ride. Sometimes in Part 141 scenarios, failing an EOC feels like the end of the world. Like, should I even be in this career? That accident did that to me a little bit. It mentally challenged me. Am I good enough to do this? So as soon as I could, I got into a 172 and I wanted to go flying. I had to make sure that I didn't sit around and just think about the accident. On takeoff, of course, out of nowhere at about 200 feet, a big gust of wind hit the plane and caused it to dip to the left. And I vividly remember my left leg shaking because I was experiencing a minor bit of wind shear. To be honest, it was no more than light turbulence. But that helped me. That helped me to know that I had what I needed to do to control the aircraft, because before I could think about it, I'd already had the control inputs in with rudder and aileron to correct for that and to keep flying. I don't even think the CFI that was with me at the time knew that that happened. Every maneuver looked great. Everything felt good. It was good to be back in the air. Nobody likes talking about their failures. My goal through this whole video is to encourage you. I've used this accident as an opportunity to help students, and I teach at MTSU, to encourage them on overcoming failure. Coming in here with the Cessna 140 was like the final chapter, because I landed for the first time since the accident back on this grass strip. And to me, it just gives me the confidence to know that those factors that we talked about, the things that could not control, the external factors, the fact that the NOTAM system wasn't working correctly, the AWAS or the weather station was broken the day that I flew out of there, and I just did not realize that I was recognizing that. My gut was telling me the wind was higher than that, but I didn't question it like I should have. Coupled with me going past my committal point out here and still attempting to go around, even though I predetermined that that was unsafe, and my personal minimums creeping up, all of that culminated into this accident that I am very fortunate to still be here after. There's another side to this story though that I just want to share with you guys. I'm a Christian, and I truly believe that God works all things together for good to those that love Him. I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to be an aviation missionary pilot, but after 11 months on the field, I realized it wasn't for me. I could not handle some of the issues that I was facing. And on top of that, this accident that I had in my mall was a huge challenge, something that I had to overcome personally, as well as something that I obviously had to overcome when it came to getting my medical back and everything involved with that. When I lost the mall, the insurance paid out for the damage on it. It was a total loss. With that insurance money, I purchased a Aztec, which I got my my multi-instructor, and I taught that for a while. Some of the videos on this channel are actually PowerPoints and training modules that I would use for my multi-engine instruction classes that I would teach. When I went to MTSU, there was two things that they required. One of two things I could have to become a professor. I either needed an ATP or I needed my CFI, II, and MEI, my multi-engine instructor's rating. Losing the mall sort of allowed me to broaden my horizons and add my multi-instructor, which ultimately leads me to what I'm doing today. And I love it. I love to teach. I love to, in the classroom, be able to make connections for students and to encourage them that when they have adversity in their career, whether it's failing a check ride, failing a written exam, failing an EOC, that they look at that as an opportunity to learn rather than something maybe pushing them to select a different career path. Thank you for watching today. I really have enjoyed sharing this process and project with all of you. Having the 140 back here at the farm is incredible. It's so nice to be able to just jump in the plane early in the morning and run out for a quick flight. And I look forward to sharing some of those adventures with you, as well as whatever updates and mods I end up doing on this aircraft. So it definitely needs a new panel. I'm researching whether or not I want to try to tackle that myself, or maybe partner with somebody and sort of document the process of them updating the panel with a NavCom transponder and an ADS-B out solution for me. I'm also really considering the wings, whether or not I want to go ahead and maybe recover these. And if I do that, then why not just strip the paint down and repaint it? So who knows? We'll see what happens here. Hopefully I can find another project plane. I am in the market to look for maybe a Cub or something that I could find an unairworthy aircraft and then bring it back to being airworthy again. So we'll see. That's something that's on my radar. I appreciate you guys watching. Have a great rest of your day.